Hello, boys and girls, and welcome back to another episode of Ushanka Show. Stories about life in the Soviet Union. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи! В эфире программа Ushanka Show. So recently I posted several photos on my Ushanka Show community page, and it's pictures of me back in 1987 in Baku, Azerbaijan. And a lot of people asked if I can share the story. So today we're going to talk about my experience traveling in the USSR as a teenager. And as I mentioned already, we went to Baku, Azerbaijan. Well, at that time was called Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic. So I found those photos again, and fortunately on the back I wrote detailed information about that trip. Азербайджанская СССР, город Баку, 5-9 января 1987 года, снимок в дворце Шаха, на заднем плане мечеть, поездка от НИИ «Сатурн». Translation: Азербайджанская Soviet Socialist Republic, but I put too many C's there. It should be only two. CCP or SSR, Soviet Socialist Republic. Town of Baku, 5 to 9 January of 1987. In 1987, I was 16. This picture was taken in a Shah castle. On the background is a mechet, mosque, and this is a trip from Research Institute Saturn, where my mother worked. The second photo had the same comment on the back, except we were taking a photo next to the monument of 26 Baku commissars. And we'll talk about 26 Baku commissars later. But it's interesting, this is the time when I was switching from cursive to printing. I believe I mentioned before in my videos about Soviet education, we were taught how to write cursive and we were writing in cursive. But then in the 9th grade, so this is like a Soviet high school, I decided, you know what, I'm going to switch to actual printing, like typing instead of cursive. So this is my attempts to start writing in typed letters. And my teachers didn't mind, no one told me anything. So slowly but surely in my Soviet high school, 9th to 10th grade, I switched from cursive to printing. What's kind of funny about this trip, I absolutely didn't want to go. Like, I was fighting tooth and nail, but my mother literally forced me to go because she purchased putyovka, which we called travel vouchers, through her labor union in her Research Institute Saturn. And she's like, you're going. And man, I didn't want to go at all because there was just a bunch of strangers, so kids of other co-workers of my mom's. I didn't know anyone, so I had no desire to go. When I mentioned putyovka, you guys had no idea what I was talking about. I have a separate playlist called Soviet Tourism where I explain everything in quite a detail. I'll provide the link below in the comment section. And looking back, I'm kind of mad at myself because I had opportunities to travel within Soviet Union back when I was a teenager. My mom were asking me like, hey, they have putyovka going to Moscow for your spring break or going to Leningrad for your winter break, and I just didn't want to go anywhere. So finally she got sick and tired of me saying no, and she forced me to go to Baku. And I was fighting tooth and nail because when my dad took me that evening to the central train station in Kiev, and I saw a bunch of these other kids, total strangers, I was literally begging my father, almost crying, like, please tell mom I'm feeling sick now, whatever. And my dad like, nope, your mother told me that you're going on a train and I have to come back by myself. So yeah, I even tried at the train station to stay home, but I failed. And going from Kiev to Baku by train, it's a long trip. It's a total of 52 hours, and it's about 2,800 kilometers or 1,800 miles. By car, it's faster, about 30 hours and 1,400 miles. And of course, right now, you couldn't travel because you need to drive through Russia in order to get to Azerbaijan. So that train trip was the longest and still the longest trip by train I ever took. As I said, it's 52 hours, so we left in the evening, through the night, through whole day, through the night, through the most of the day, and then pretty much late at night we finally arrived to Baku. Our train car was so-called Platskart, and I have also videos about traveling by train in the Soviet Union. I'll post the link in the comment section as well. So Platskart is pretty much almost the cheapest way you can travel. The cheapest is so-called general car, that they just sell tickets and people pile up. There's no, assigned spots, places for you. Platskart, there's just no privacy. There's no doors. You could see people across from you. And of course, you share a bathroom with everyone on that car. And of course, there's no showers, which, growing up in Soviet Union, it didn't bother anyone, I think. not to take a shower for a couple of days. In some way, it was kind of nice to be on the train for so long because we were stuck in one train car, all our group. So we had to kind of get to know each other. We played cards, telling jokes, anecdotes. So it's kind of, by the time we got to Baku, our group was pretty good. We knew each other, so that was decent. Still very long, 52 hours on the train, my goodness, that's too much. And I just realized I never knew how big was our group, so I had to count on the picture. So we had a total of 29 people, 29 teenagers, 14 boys, 15 girls, and then we had 2 adults as our supervision. So since everyone is teenager, you don't need that many adult supervision. So, but still, it's a large group, almost 30 people. Everyone had to bring their own food. Although long-distance trains had so-called wagon restaurants, so a restaurant car, but it was very expensive. So you just had to bring your own food, hard-boiled eggs, maybe some cutlets, bread, salt in little match boxes. Well, it's winter, so there were no cucumbers. So yeah, you had to bring everything. They only served tea in the car. Unfortunately, I don't remember anything from the train trip to Baku except I remember when we saw Caucasian mountains in the distance, so that was really cool. So we were already probably in Azerbaijan and on the right side of the train, so we were going down south towards Baku. So on the one side it was Caspian Sea and the other side was Caucasian mountains. That was a beautiful view. We stayed in a nice modern hotel right downtown. At that time, of course, we didn't call center of the city downtown, but downtown Baku. And I looked it up. I think it was called Hotel Azerbaijan, but it was demolished later after Azerbaijan became independent and oil wealthy. So it's not there anymore, but it was pretty nice. And of course, it had its own restaurant. And I remember it was kind of fancy. I believe it was the very first time I ate in a hotel restaurant, like, everyday meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's where in Baku, where I got introduced to chicken Kiev. I never ate chicken Kiev while I lived in Kiev all my life. I tried chicken Kiev in Baku. Unfortunately, back in 1987, I didn't own a camera, and I just checked on the photo. It looks like no one brought a camera with them, even our, I think it's the word chaperones. So the only 2 pictures we have is the local photographers that they make money by taking group photos by some place of interest. So that's the only things I have from that trip, just these 2 group photos, nothing else. And I didn't keep a diary. There's another thing I missed, so I don't recall exactly what we did every day, but it was a standard, you have your breakfast, and then we have a bus waiting for us. We go somewhere to see places of interest. So quite a few of them, of course, in Baku. It's an ancient city. So I recognize, like, there's that tower, I think it's called minaret of the mosque on the background of one of our group photos. So that used to be a palace for the local Shah. So we definitely visit that. And I also remember visiting Fire Temple of Baku. So that official name is Shah of Baku. So that's that castle-like religious temple in suburbs of Baku. It was built back in 17th century around this natural flames. So there was a holes in the ground where the natural gas was coming out and caught fire. So that was a kind of place for Zoroastrian place of worship, pretty much. So that was pretty cool. Although I didn't know about it, but natural eternal flame went out in 1869 after nearly a century of usage of the petroleum and gas in the area. So then they piped the gas from nearby cities. So when I was there in 1987, it was not a natural anymore. It was actually burning the gas that was piped. I believe we had like one tourist trip per day on the bus, and then afternoons we could walk around, and every evening also we walked around and explored the city. And of course, that's the Soviet Union time. There's no bars, there's no dance clubs or anything like that. So we were just kind of walked around, visited markets, stuff like that. So nothing super exciting. There were several things that surprised me about Baku. I don't remember being surprised by architecture. So a lot of the areas we visited were just the standard Soviet-looking apartment buildings. And I don't think that took us anywhere where it was like interesting, rough-looking, ancient buildings. But I remember one thing: no one gave you change. So, like coins-wise. they'll give you, if it's a change, a couple of rubles, they'll give you that change. But if it's, something as 1 ruble 50 kopecks, you give them 2 rubles, they don't give you change. And that was quite a shock, especially, your parents give you money, and even 10 kopecks, it's a lot of money for a teenager, and suddenly no one gives you change. That was just their way of keeping tips or something. And I remember, we had to count and borrow coins from each other to make sure you pay exactly what it's price, otherwise you will never see change. I also remember I noticed that I never seen a single Zaporozhets ZZ car, so those kind of the cheapest Soviet-made cars. I only saw a lot of Volgas and a lot of Lada Zhiguli cars, no ZZ, so they were wealthier than, for example, Ukrainians. And of course, you need to remember, Azerbaijanis, they look different comparing with Ukrainians or Russians. We are more fair skinned, a lot of us blonde. Azerbaijanis, kind of like Armenians and Georgians, they usually, it's I guess they're Turkish kind of descent, so they dark hair. Older guys always wear mustache, sometimes they wear silly hats. So people could see on the street right away that we were not local, although there were some Russians, of course, living in Baku, but of course our group, anyone could see that we are not local. As I mentioned, we went to Baku in January, so of course in Kiev was real winter, snow, cold. Now Baku is way more south, and it's on the shores of the big Caspian Sea, so climate was way warmer. Still kind of chilly, but way warmer than in Kiev, so that was nice. I liked visiting a local market, bazaar, and there was a shock there because we had this popular drink called tarhun, and so it's like a soda. It's a really poisonous green color, way greener than Sprite. Actually, Sprite is clear, just the bottle is green. But I discovered at that market they sold pickled tarhun, so that was actually a herb, and they will pickle it and they sell it and let us sample it. So that was really kind of interesting surprise to discover that tarhun could be salty, kind of pickle thing, while tarhun drink is really syrupy sweet. And in the evening, they allowed us to go for walks because we stayed in a hotel that was really close to the shores of Caspian Sea, and they had the so-called promenade, I think it's called. So there's a nice walk for pedestrians, and you can just walk along the shore. There's different things you can buy, snacks. I remember riding bump cars. There was this little attraction. And after a couple of days in Baku, our group kind of split up a little bit. So older teenagers, the ones that were 18, were kind of hanging out on their own, younger ones on their own. So I had a small group, a couple of guys and a couple of girls that we kind of liked each other. So in the evening, we'll go together. And, the girls preferred to go, never went on their own, because quite a few locals, those guys were pretty aggressive. They trying to hey, you want to date me? They just liked, I want to almost say white girls. So there was a lot going on of that. They didn't like to be on their own. So we had to walk with them if they want to go for a walk. And actually some older girls, I'm not sure what exactly happened, but there were a couple of guys actually sitting in the hotel lobby and watching for those girls, because I guess they maybe were too playful and these guys got all excited or something. But I remember our group was hiding for a while, waiting for those guys to go, or think about calling cops or, militia, because the girls were actually got quite scared. And speaking of being scared, I believe on the last day of our stay in Baku, we had another tourist trip on the bus to a nearby town called Sumgait. And that was scary. When we got off the bus, there was just a group of local teenagers, and teenagers and guys in their 20s. And they were so aggressive, following us, commenting. We end up basically quitting our, I don't know why we went there, what we were supposed to see, maybe a museum or something. But we just no, we need to get out of here. And guess what? So I'm talking about January 1987. A year later, in February, March 1988, there were so-called Sumgait pogroms, which targeted Armenian population of the lakeside town of Sumgait in Azerbaijan. And I believe there's quite a few people got killed back then. You can look up Sumgait pogrom, but I remember being in Sumgait a year prior, and we were actually quite horrified. That was scary. We just got back on the bus and left. Another bad experience that I remember in Baku is on the last day when we were getting ready to leave, I decided to buy some really nice apples for my parents. They give me money. And that was at this switch. So I remember a guy telling me one price, but when he gave me apples, check the weight, I bought a kilogram or two. Suddenly he's like, this is the price. And I was like, you told me different price. So anyway, there was almost an argument and I felt screwed because I swear, he told me it's, for example, 51 ruble for a kilogram, and suddenly it was way more. So I ended up paying instead of 1 ruble 5, and I was very upset. But it's an older guy being pushy, all angry with me, and yeah, that was bad. But generally, we had a good time. It was interesting to see Baku and spend some time there. As I said, there was just a couple of these scary moments in Sumgait, and then of course there was horny local Azerbaijani guys that really wanted to know our girls better. And then, of course, then we had to travel by train again back to Kiev for 52 hours. And I believe this time our chaperones collected money from everyone, so they bought food so we all can have some food on the way home. So, 50 hours on the train, you need a lot of food for teenagers. And guess what? Our train was late 12 hours. So besides the normal travel time is 52 hours, then somehow our train fell behind the schedule, and it's just kind of like a domino effect. Once you late a little bit, it's getting worse and worse. So in the end, we were late a total of 12 hours, and we ran out of food as well as everyone else on the train. And that's another thing I remember pretty clearly from the trip. So we stopped in early morning. There was already somewhere in Ukraine. I don't remember which town, maybe Zaporizhia. So we got out searching for food. We still had a little bit of change left, like literally 50 kopecks or something. There was some old lady selling meat pies, piroshki. So we bought, with all the money we had, maybe 3 or 4 of those, got back on the train, started eating. And there was another group of children on the train with us, also going from Baku back to Kiev. But those were small kids, like 7, maybe 8-year-olds. And I remember, so we ate these piroshkis, hungry as wolves. And this little kid stopped by us and looking at us and like, are those piroshkis are delicious? Well, like, yeah, they are pretty good. And he's like, well, if you have any left, I can use some. I'm very hungry. We don't have any food. So we felt bad. We gave a guy one pirozhok, and I just was like, I never had anyone in my life beg me for food like that, so that was also a different experience. So yes, this is how my trip to Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, went back in 1987, and that was pretty much the only trip by Putyovka that I did during the Soviet days. I also traveled to Leningrad in 1986, a year prior, but that was because of Chernobyl, and I have a video about it. If you missed it, I'll post the link below in the comment section. But yeah, unfortunately, you get smarter with years. Looking back, I wish I traveled more, but it is what it is. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I need to tell you about 26 Baku commissars, because that was the monument behind us on one of the photos. So once again, Soviet Union, you have to visit some important Soviet history monuments. So that's the 26 Baku commissars were Bolshevik and left socialist members of Baku Commune. And they were, I don't want to go through the whole story. There's a Wikipedia article about it, but they were executed in 1918 by a firing squad, and then became kind of like the heroes of the trying to create a socialist Azerbaijan Soviet Republic. And as I'm scrolling through this article, apparently there were questions about what actually happened, because Soviet officials later blamed the executions on British agents acting in Baku, and the British said, no, we have nothing to do with it. But in the end, there was, they made them like a symbol of struggle. So there was movies, artwork, in even that monument for 26 Commissars Memorial in Baku that we were taking photo next to. And I just discovered that it's gone. In January 2009, Baku authorities, they began demolition of the memorial. Of course, there was some opposition from local left-wingers in Azerbaijan Communist Party. But anyways, the monument is gone. Bodies were moved to the local cemetery and there's no more there. Okay, my friends, it's all I can tell you about my trip to Baku, Azerbaijan back in 1987. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like it, post your comment, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания, goodbye.